They say there are secrets buried so deep in Graceland's walls that even death couldn't pry them loose. In 1976, Elvis Presley locked something in his personal vault, a record that never appeared on any discography, never played on any radio, never saw the light of a recording studio. He listened to it exactly once, wept like a child, and swore everyone in the room to absolute silence. For 47 years, that secret held, until a dying man's confession and a locked box discovered in a Nashville storage unit revealed the truth about the song that shattered the king. The title? You won't believe it when you hear it. The story behind it? Even more impossible. What do you think could make Elvis cry? Drop your wildest guess below before reading further. Nashville, 2023. The Riverside Storage Auction House smelled of dust, forgotten dreams, and the particular staleness that comes from decades of abandonment. Sarah Mitchell, a music memorabilia dealer with an eye for hidden treasure, had come for a routine estate sale, Unit 247, belonging to one James "Red" Archer. Deceased, no living relatives, rent unpaid for 3 months. Red Archer. The name meant nothing to most people, but Sarah's grandfather had mentioned him once. A session musician who'd floated around Memphis in the 70s, playing backup for artists whose names were now legend. He died alone in a VA hospital, leaving behind nothing but a storage unit full of what the auctioneer dismissively called musical junk. Sarah won the bidding at $340. Inside, she found exactly what she expected. Guitar cases with broken latches, dusty amplifiers, boxes of sheet music yellowed with age, photographs of musicians whose faces she vaguely recognized. But at the very back, hidden beneath a moth-eaten stage curtain, sat a fireproof lockbox sealed with a combination lock and covered in warnings written in faded marker. Do not open. Property of J.R.A. And most intriguingly, for Sarah, if you're reading this, I kept my promise. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. How did a man she'd never met know her name? It took 3 days and a professional locksmith to open it without damaging the contents. Inside, wrapped in acid-free paper and sealed in protective plastic, lay a single vinyl acetate, the kind used for test pressings in recording studios. No label, no markings except a date etched into the run-out groove. November 4th, 76. Beneath it, a leather journal and a letter addressed to whoever finds this. The letter, written in shaky handwriting, began, My name is James "Red" Archer, and I'm the only person still alive who knows what made Elvis Presley cry. I've carried this secret for 47 years, and it's eaten me alive. I'm dying now, lung cancer, stage 4, and I can't take it to my grave. But I made a promise to someone I loved, so I'm leaving this where it might be found. Or might not. If you're reading this, you were meant to know. Sarah's heart hammered as she continued reading. Red's words painted a picture of November 4th, 1976, a cold Memphis night when he'd been called to Graceland for what he thought was a standard session. Instead, he walked into something he described as a séance, a confessional, and a goodbye all rolled into one. The journal contained detailed entries spanning from 1952 to 1976, documenting Red's relationship with a woman named Violet Thorne, a name that appeared nowhere in rock and roll history, in no liner notes, in no biographical records. According to Red, Violet was a genius songwriter who'd penned hits for major artists, but always under pseudonyms, always in the shadows. And she'd written one final song, a song she made Red promise would reach Elvis Presley and no one else before she died. Sarah looked at the acetate, her hands shaking. After 47 years, she was holding the only copy of the song that made the king cry. Sarah spent the next week devouring Red's journal, piecing together the impossible story of Violet Thorne. According to the entries, Violet had been born in 1931 in a small town outside Memphis, blessed with what Red called an unholy talent for understanding human pain and turning it into music. By the early 1950s, she was writing songs in secret, selling them through intermediaries to artists who'd score hits without ever knowing who'd really written them. Red claimed she'd penned at least 15 top 10 songs between 1952 and 1965, all credited to male writers who paid her cash and kept their mouths shut. In the journal's margins, Red had scribbled titles, but they were coded, initials and numbers that Sarah couldn't decipher. She had reasons for hiding, one entry read, reasons I promised never to write down explicitly. But let's just say that in 1950s America, a woman like Violet, brilliant, uncompromising, and carrying secrets that could destroy lives, had to be invisible to survive. The entries grew more cryptic around 1956, the year Elvis exploded onto the national scene. Red wrote about Violet becoming obsessed with Elvis, but not in the way of a typical fan. She studied his performances, analyzed his vocal inflections, collected newspaper clippings about his childhood, his relationship with his mother, his twin brother who'd died at birth. She sees something in him, Red wrote in March 1957. Something broken and beautiful. She says he's singing everyone else's pain, but hasn't found the song that speaks his own. She wants to write it for him. I told her she's playing with fire. The relationship between Red and Violet was complicated. More than friendship, less than romance. Bound by music and mutual secrets. They'd met at a recording session in 1952, and Red had become her confidant, her studio connection, her keeper of secrets. He loved her. That much was clear from his words, but Violet was married to her ghosts, as he put it. Then came the entry from July 1976 that made Sarah's blood run cold. Violet called today. She's dying. Pancreatic cancer, maybe 3 months left. She's finally going to do it. Write the song she's been planning for 20 years. She says it's the only true thing she'll ever create. She says Elvis needs to hear it before she goes, needs to know that someone understands. I begged her not to. Some stones shouldn't be turned over. But she's determined. God help us all. The subsequent entries documented the creation of the song through August and September 1976. Violet worked in secret, in the small apartment she'd kept in Memphis under a false name. Red visited weekly, bringing her pain medication, groceries, and eventually portable recording equipment. She recorded it herself, Red wrote on October 30th. Her voice is weak from the illness, but that makes it more real somehow. She sang it 3 times, crying through each take. I've heard 1,000 songs in my life, played on 100 records. This one is different. This one feels like it could kill someone. Sarah turned the page, her hands trembling. The next entry was dated November 4th, 1976, the same date on the acetate. Red's entry from November 4th, 1976, was the longest in the journal. 5 pages of cramped handwriting that grew increasingly frantic as it progressed. Violet died this morning at 6:47 a.m. I was holding her hand. Her last words were, "Make sure he hears it, Red. Make sure Elvis knows he wasn't alone." I promised. God forgive me. I promised. By 8 p.m., I was at Graceland's gates with the acetate in a locked briefcase. I'd called ahead, told them I had something urgent from a mutual friend who'd just passed. Elvis's people are used to crazy claims, but I dropped enough names from the old Sun Studios days that someone took me seriously. They kept me waiting in a side room for 2 hours. I almost left a dozen times. The acetate felt like it was burning through the briefcase. Finally, around 10:30 p.m., I was escorted to the music room. Elvis was there with maybe 5 people: Jerry Schilling, Charlie Hodge, a couple others whose names I didn't catch, and his father, Vernon, lurking in the back like a ghost. Elvis looked terrible. This wasn't the young god from the 50s or even the Vegas showman from the early 70s. This was a man being eaten alive by something. Fame, pills, loneliness, all of it. His eyes were puffy, his movements slow. But when I explained I had a song from a woman who'd just died, a woman who'd known things about him, those eyes sharpened. "What woman?" he asked. I told him about Violet, about her secret career, about the songs she'd written that he'd probably heard 100 times without knowing. He looked skeptical, but intrigued. "And she wrote something for me?" "She wrote the truth," I said, which in hindsight was probably the worst possible thing to say. I put the acetate on his turntable, a beautiful custom piece that probably cost more than my car. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the needle. Then the music started. The song had no introduction, no instrumental build-up. It began with Violet's raw, cancer-weakened voice singing words I'd heard her rehearse, but that hit differently in that room, with those people, with Elvis Presley standing 3 feet away. I can't write the lyrics here. I promised Violet some things stay sacred, but I can tell you what it was about. It was about twins, about the living and the dead, about carrying the ghost of a brother who never got to breathe, about a mother's grief becoming a son's burden, about being raised by people haunted by loss, and learning to perform happiness while drowning in inherited sadness. But that wasn't the devastating part. The devastating part was the bridge, where Violet revealed something that even I hadn't known she knew. Something about Elvis's birth that contradicted the official story. Something about his mother Gladys, and a secret she'd kept until her death. in 1958. I watched Elvis's face change as he listened. Confusion, then recognition, then something like terror. By the second verse, he'd sat down heavily in his chair. By the bridge, tears were streaming down his face. When the song ended, there was absolute silence. The silence after the song ended felt like it lasted an hour. Red's journal continued. It was probably 30 seconds. Elvis sat with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. No one moved. No one spoke. I'd never felt so certain I'd done the wrong thing. Finally, Vernon Presley stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but hard as iron. Where did she get this information? I told him the truth, that Violet had connections all over Memphis, that she'd spent decades collecting stories, that she'd been obsessed with understanding Elvis's pain. But Vernon wasn't satisfied. He got closer, his face inches from mine. Did she know Gladys? I said I didn't think so, but then I remembered something Violet had mentioned once in passing, about working briefly as a seamstress in Tupelo in the late 1940s, about befriending a young mother with a small boy who loved to sing. My face must have shown the realization because Vernon's expression turned to stone. Elvis finally spoke, his voice wrecked. Is it true? What the song says about Jesse? I had no idea what to tell him. I'd assumed the song was metaphorical, poetic license about his twin brother's death. But the way Vernon reacted, the way Elvis asked the question, something in that song wasn't just emotional truth. It was factual truth. Vernon ordered everyone out except himself, Elvis, and me. For the next 20 minutes, that old man told a story I wish I'd never heard, a story about what really happened the night Elvis and Jesse were born. About complications, about choices made in desperation, about a doctor who wasn't quite sober, and a midwife who couldn't save both babies. About Gladys Presley's guilt and grief, and the secret she made Vernon swear to keep. According to Vernon, Jesse hadn't been stillborn. He'd lived for almost 3 hours struggling to breathe, while the doctor insisted there was nothing to be done. Gladys had held both babies, knowing one was dying. And in those hours, she'd made a choice that haunted her for the rest of her life. She'd focused all her attention, all her love, all her desperate prayer on the stronger baby, on Elvis. She never forgave herself, Vernon said. She felt like she'd chosen you over him, like she'd let Jesse die by loving you more. It twisted her up inside, made her hold on to you too tight, made her afraid every second that God would punish her by taking you too. Elvis was crying openly now. How did this woman know? How could she possibly know? I explained about the seamstress work, about Violet's gift for getting people to confide in her. Vernon nodded slowly. Gladys had a friend back then, woman who sewed with her. She might have told her things in a weak moment. Things she never told another soul. Elvis stood up abruptly, went to the turntable and lifted the needle. What's the song called? He asked. I told him. His face went white. Play it again, he said. We listened 3 more times. By the end, all 3 of us were crying. Red's journal entry continued with increasing detail about what happened in the hours after that 4th playing. Around 2 a.m., Elvis made a decision. He wanted the acetate destroyed. Not just hidden, destroyed. Melted down, erased, eliminated from existence. Jerry Schilling argued against it, said it was a piece of history, but Elvis was adamant. This song can't exist. It's too true. It's too much. But then Vernon said something that changed everything. Your mama would want you to keep it, not to share it, but to keep it. Elvis stared at his father for a long moment, then nodded. He had me follow him to his private vault, a legitimate bank-grade safe built into a hidden room off his bedroom. Inside were things I glimpsed but won't detail. Personal letters, jewelry, photographs, documents. He placed the acetate in a protective sleeve and locked it inside. No one can ever hear this, he said. Not biographers, not fans, not family. This is between me, Jesse, and Mama. You understand? I understood. But then he asked me something I didn't expect. Tell me about Violet. Tell me who she really was. So I told him about her genius, her anonymity, her complicated life, about how she'd spent decades crafting songs about other people's pain while hiding her own, about the secrets she'd kept, the reasons she could never step into the spotlight. Elvis listened intently, then asked, "Did she have children?" The question caught me off guard. I told him the truth, that Violet had given birth to a son in 1952, a child she'd been forced to give up for adoption because she was unmarried and desperately poor. She'd never revealed who the father was, never tried to find the child, but had spent the rest of her life writing songs to the child she'd never know. Elvis went very still. Do you think she wrote this song as a parent or as a person? I said I thought she wrote it as both, as someone who understood the pain of Jesse's death from both sides. As a twin who'd survived, she'd written about survivor's guilt. As a mother who'd given away a child, she'd written about the grief of letting go. As someone who'd known Gladys Presley, she'd written about the weight of secrets that destroy families. What was the kid's name? Elvis asked. The child she gave up? I told him I didn't know. Violet never spoke the name aloud. But according to the adoption papers she'd shown me once, the birth certificate listed only one word: Jesse. Elvis's face went white. She named him Jesse? I nodded. And then he did something I'll never forget. He laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of laugh that comes when reality becomes so strange that the only response is absurdity. Red, he said finally, I want you to make me 2 promises. First, you never speak about this night to anyone while I'm alive. Second, if anything happens to me, you make sure this song doesn't fall into the wrong hands. It stays locked away forever, or it gets destroyed. Those are the only options. I promised both. Sarah had reached the final pages of Red's journal, her heart pounding. The old musician's handwriting had deteriorated toward the end, the letters shaky and uneven, written clearly in his final days. It's 2023 now, and I'm dying. 47 years since that night. Elvis died less than a year after hearing Violet's song, August 16th, 1977. Whether the song contributed to his death, I can't say, but I know it changed something in him. Those last months, according to people who were there, he was different, more melancholic, more reflective, more convinced he was living on borrowed time. The acetate stayed in his vault at Graceland. After his death, Vernon kept the vault sealed, honoring his son's wishes. When Vernon died, the executors inventoried the vault, but that acetate was marked personal, do not catalog, destroy upon my death per EP's wishes. Somehow it survived, passed to someone who understood its significance. But I have the only other copy, the master. Violet made 2 pressings that night before she died, one for Elvis, one for safekeeping. She gave me the second with instructions. Keep it hidden until everyone involved is dead, then let the truth decide its own fate. Everyone is dead now. Violet, Elvis, Vernon, Gladys, the doctor, the midwife, everyone who was in that room at Graceland, except me. And soon I'll be gone, too. I've kept my promises. I never spoke of this while Elvis lived. I've kept the song locked away for 47 years, but I can't destroy it. It's too important. Too true, too much a testament to 3 broken people, Violet, Gladys, and Elvis, who were destroyed by secrets. So I'm leaving this where fate will decide. Maybe it'll be found. Maybe it won't. Maybe whoever finds it will have the courage to share it. Maybe they'll understand it should stay buried. But before I go, I need to reveal what I've kept hidden, even from this journal until now. The song's title. The name that made Elvis go white when I spoke it. Violet called it The Living Twin, Jesse's Lullaby. 5 words that contained everything. The survival, the guilt, the ghost, the grief. When I told Elvis the title, he understood immediately why Violet had spent 20 years preparing to write it. Why she'd waited until she was dying to record it. Why she'd named her own lost son Jesse. The song wasn't just about Elvis. It was Violet's confession. Her twin brother had died in childbirth too, in 1931. She'd spent her whole life carrying that guilt, that sense of being the wrong one to survive. When she learned about Elvis's story, she recognized a kindred spirit, another living twin haunted by a dead brother's ghost. The song was their shared eulogy, their mutual confession, their twin truth. And it was the saddest thing I've ever heard. Sarah sat back, tears streaming down her face. The acetate lay on her desk, waiting. After 47 years, she held the only surviving copy of The Living Twin, Jesse's Lullaby. Now she had to decide what to do with it. The acetate remains in Sarah's possession, locked in a climate-controlled vault, while she wrestles with an impossible choice. Honor the silence, or share the truth. Red Archer died believing fate would decide. Violet Thorne died hoping someone would understand. Elvis Presley died wanting it buried forever. What would you do? Should some secret stay buried, or does the truth deserve to be heard? Share your thoughts below, and follow for updates on Sarah's decision.